The Georgia sun beat down mercilessly on the asphalt parade ground at Fort Bragg as the latest group of recruits shuffled into formation. Among them, a slight woman with her dark hair pulled into a regulation bun moved with quiet efficiency, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen looked unremarkable in every way: average height, lean build, eyes that seemed to take in everything while revealing nothing. She found her place in the third row and stood at attention, just another face in a sea of eager soldiers reporting for the Special Operations Training Center's Advanced Combat Course. The morning air was thick with humidity and nervous energy. Young men and women, most barely out of their teens, whispered excitedly about the training ahead. They'd all volunteered for this, 12 weeks of grueling preparation designed to identify candidates for elite assignments. Fort Bragg was legendary, the home of special forces, and everyone in that formation believed they had what it took to stand out. Chen said nothing. She simply waited, her breathing calm and measured, while sweat trickled down the backs of the recruits around her. She'd learned long ago that the best way to survive was to blend in, to become part of the background noise. Invisibility was a skill she'd mastered in far more dangerous places than a training ground in North Carolina. "Attention!" The command cracked through the air like a whip. Colonel James Hartwell emerged from the administrative building, his boots striking the pavement with the rhythmic precision of a man who'd been walking military formations for over 30 years. At 62, he carried himself with the rigid bearing of the old guard, spine straight, shoulders back, eyes sharp beneath the brim of his service cap. His uniform was immaculate, his silver star and bronze star medals catching the morning light. Vietnam had forged him, and decades of service had tempered him into an instrument for identifying warriors. He began his walk down the first row, his gaze moving from face to face. This was ritual for Hartwell, this initial inspection. He'd long ago learned that you could tell a great deal about soldiers by looking them in the eye on their first day. Some met his gaze with bravado, others with fear, a precious few with quiet confidence. He'd seen thousands of recruits over the years, and his instincts rarely failed him. Hartwell moved methodically through the second row, noting details. A regulation violation here, a sign of exceptional polish there. His aide, Captain Sarah Rodriguez, followed 3 paces behind with a tablet, occasionally making notes at his murmured observations. When he reached the third row, he almost walked past Chen entirely. She stood perfectly still, eyes forward, her uniform correct in every detail. Nothing about her commanded attention. But something made Hartwell pause. Perhaps it was the absolute stillness of her posture, a quality different from the rigid tension of the other recruits. This was the stillness of someone comfortable with silence, someone who'd learned to wait. His eyes dropped to her chest. The inspection stopped. Hartwell's weathered face registered no emotion, but his body language shifted almost imperceptibly. Captain Rodriguez, sensing the change, looked up from her tablet, following the colonel's gaze. There, partially obscured by the angle of Chen's dress uniform jacket, was a silver star, the nation's third highest decoration for valor in combat. Below it, 2 purple hearts indicated wounds received in action. And beneath those, a Defense Superior Service Medal, awarded only for exceptional performance at the highest levels of military service. The medals seemed wrong somehow, incongruous on the chest of someone standing in a formation of new recruits. The silver star alone was extraordinarily rare, especially for enlisted personnel. Hartwell had served 40 years and knew perhaps a dozen people who wore it. He'd earned his own in the Mekong Delta in 1969, leading a platoon through an ambush that should have killed them all. He looked up at Chen's face. She stared straight ahead, giving no acknowledgement that she noticed his scrutiny. But Hartwell saw something in her eyes, a depth, a weariness that didn't belong to someone who should be starting basic qualification training. These were the eyes of someone who'd seen things, done things, survived things that left permanent marks. "Name," Hartwell said quietly. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen, sir. Her voice was steady, professional, utterly unremarkable. How long in service, Staff Sergeant? 6 years, sir. 6 years. Hartwell's mind worked rapidly. Young enough to still be climbing the ranks, but old enough to have seen deployment. But these medals, especially the Silver Star, those represented something extraordinary. Where did you serve? He asked, his tone neutral but his interest unmistakable. Various assignments, sir. Infantry operations, Middle East theater. The answer was textbook correct and completely uninformative. Hartwell's eyes narrowed slightly. He'd conducted thousands of inspections, asked 10,000 questions, and he knew evasion when he heard it. The other recruits in formation were beginning to notice the extended attention, craning their necks slightly to see what had captured the colonel's interest. Those are impressive decorations for someone attending introductory training, Staff Sergeant. Yes, sir. I'm here to learn, sir. Chen's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes, a silent request to move on, to not pursue this line of questioning. Hartwell held her gaze for a long moment. Every instinct he'd honed over 4 decades told him there was a story here, something significant hiding beneath the surface of this unremarkable-seeming woman. The Silver Star wasn't given for routine bravery. It was awarded for gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States, for risking one's life above and beyond the call of duty. Whatever Chen had done to earn it, it wasn't recorded in the casual way she stood before him now. "Carry on, Staff Sergeant," he said finally, but made a mental note of her name. "Yes, sir." Hartwell continued down the row, finishing his inspection with mechanical efficiency, but his mind remained on the woman in the 3rd row. As he completed the formation and delivered his opening remarks, the standard speech about excellence, dedication, and the proud tradition of Fort Bragg, his eyes kept drifting back to Chen, who stood motionless among the eager recruits, somehow apart from them despite standing shoulder to shoulder. When he dismissed the formation, Hartwell turned to Captain Rodriguez. "Pull the service record for Staff Sergeant Maya Chen. I want it on my desk within the hour." Rodriguez nodded, her curiosity evident. "Sir, those medals." "I know, Captain. That's exactly why I want her file." As the recruits dispersed toward their assigned barracks, Chen allowed herself the smallest of exhales. She'd known this moment would come eventually, had prepared for it, but she'd hoped to make it through at least the first week before attracting attention. She shouldered her duffel and walked toward her assigned quarters, feeling the weight of the colonel's scrutiny even after he'd turned away. The medals on her chest, visible reminders of things she couldn't talk about, places that officially didn't exist, missions that had no names, suddenly felt heavier than they had in months. The game had begun, whether she wanted it to or not. Colonel Hartwell's office was a museum of military history, walls lined with commendations, photographs of units long since disbanded, and a bookshelf filled with tactical manuals spanning 5 decades of warfare. He sat behind his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, staring at the most frustrating document he'd encountered in years. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen's service record was a masterpiece of bureaucratic obfuscation. The first page was standard enough. Born in San Francisco, enlisted at 19, completed basic training at Fort Jackson with high marks. Infantry specialty, airborne qualified, expert marksman. Nothing extraordinary. Then, after her initial assignment to the 10th Mountain Division, the file became a labyrinth of redactions and administrative black holes. Transferred to special assignment, classification level, TSSCI, read 1 entry dated 2 years and 3 months prior. Top secret sensitive compartmented information, the highest level of classification, reserved for intelligence operations and covert activities. The assignment lasted 18 months, but the location was listed simply as Oconus, outside continental United States. No unit designation. No commanding officer listed. No performance reviews. The next entry showed her return stateside. followed by a medical evaluation that was entirely redacted except for the words "fit for duty." Then came the awards: Silver Star, 2 Purple Hearts, Defense Superior Service Medal, all dated within that 18-month window, all with citation details marked classified. Hartwell removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. In 4 decades of military service, he'd seen classified operations before. He'd run a few himself, but this level of secrecy around a staff sergeant's file was unusual. Whatever Chen had been doing, it wasn't ordinary combat operations. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter." Captain Sarah Rodriguez stepped inside, her tablet in hand. "Sir, I made inquiries about Staff Sergeant Chen's file as requested." "And?" Rodriguez's expression was carefully neutral. "I was told to direct all questions to Defense Intelligence Agency, who then referred me to Special Operations Command, who referred me to a number that rang 4 times and disconnected. When I called back, a different person answered and told me that Staff Sergeant Chen's previous assignments are not available for review without explicit authorization from the Office of the Secretary of Defense." Hartwell's eyebrows rose. "The SecDef's office?" "Yes, sir. The person I spoke with was polite but absolutely clear. They suggested I cease inquiries unless I had operational need to know." Rodriguez paused. "Sir, I've never been stonewalled like that for a staff sergeant's file, not even for Special Forces personnel." Hartwell leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. "What did you observe during this morning's training?" Rodriguez consulted her tablet. Chen completed the obstacle course in the top 15%, but her time wasn't exceptional. During hand-to-hand combat drills, she paired well but didn't dominate. Marksmanship qualification, sharpshooter, not expert. Everything she does is competent but deliberately unremarkable." "Deliberately?" "Yes, sir. I've been watching soldiers train for 8 years. Most recruits in this program are trying to prove themselves, to stand out. They push for the fastest time, the highest score. Chen seems to be doing the opposite, performing well enough to avoid attention but holding back." Rodriguez looked up from her tablet. "It's like she's actively trying to blend in." Hartwell stood and walked to his window, which overlooked the training grounds. He could see small groups of recruits running drills, their instructors barking corrections. What else? During the tactical scenario this afternoon, her team was ambushed in the simulation. The team leader froze, classic rookie mistake. Chen could have taken command, but she didn't. She waited exactly the right amount of time for it to look like natural initiative, then made a suggestion that got the team leader back on track. She made him look good while essentially running the operation from the shadows. "Interesting." "Sir, there's something else." Rodriguez hesitated. "During a water break, I was close enough to overhear some of the other recruits talking. One of them asked Chen where she served before this. She said Fort Campbell, routine deployment to Kuwait. But I checked. There's no record of her ever being assigned to Fort Campbell, and her deployment records are completely redacted." "She lied." "She gave them a plausible answer that would stop further questions, sir. It's what someone would do if they were trained in maintaining cover." Hartwell turned from the window. "You think she's intelligence?" "I think she's something, sir. The question is what, and why she's here in a basic qualification program when she clearly has advanced training." Hartwell moved back to his desk and opened a locked drawer, withdrawing a secure phone, the kind used for classified communications. "I'm going to make some calls. In the meantime, I want you to continue observing Chen, but be subtle. If she's as well trained as we suspect, she'll notice if the attention is too obvious." "Yes, sir. May I ask, why are we pursuing this? If her previous assignment is classified, maybe we should respect that." It was a fair question. Hartwell considered it carefully. "Captain, I run a program designed to identify soldiers for elite assignments. I can't properly assess someone whose true capabilities are deliberately hidden. If Chen has advanced training, she belongs in an instructor role or a specialized unit, not pretending to be a novice. But more than that, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Those medals on her chest, she earned them in combat. The silver star represents extraordinary valor. If she's here, hiding what she can do, there's a reason. I want to know what it is. Rodriguez nodded. I'll keep watching, sir. After she left, Hartwell picked up the secure phone and began making calls. His first contact was an old friend at SOCOM who owed him a favor. The conversation was brief and unhelpful. His friend claimed to know nothing about Chen but promised to ask around. The second call was to a former student who now worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency. That conversation ended even more quickly. Sir, I literally cannot discuss that name on this line. I'm sorry. The third call to a contact in Army G2 intelligence yielded only a cryptic warning. Jim, you're a good officer and a better man. Take my advice. Whatever you think you're looking for, you don't want to find it. Let this one go. But Hartwell had never been good at letting things go. He spent the rest of the evening reviewing footage from the day's training exercises, watching Chen move through drills with practiced competence that somehow seemed too controlled, too measured. Every action looked natural, but there was something underneath, like watching a professional dancer perform beginner steps. At 2100 hours, his secure phone rang. The number was blocked. Colonel Hartwell, he answered. Colonel. The voice was male, middle-aged, with no regional accent. I understand you've been making inquiries about one of your recruits. Who is this? Someone who knows her story, and someone who's going to give you advice that you should take. Leave it alone. I need to understand who I have in my program. You have a soldier who served her country in ways you can't imagine, in places that don't exist on any map. She earned every ribbon on that chest doing things that kept Americans safe while sleeping at night. That's all you need to know. If she's that skilled, why is she in a basic program? There was a pause. Maybe she wants to be normal for a while. Maybe she's earned that right. Let her have it, Colonel. I can't properly train someone. You can and you will. Assess her on what you see, not what you don't know. And Colonel, stop making calls about her. You're creating noise that could put people at risk, people who are still in the field. The line went dead. Hartwell sat in the darkness of his office, the phone still in his hand. The conversation had raised more questions than it answered, but one thing was clear. Maya Chen was no ordinary recruit, and whether he liked it or not, her presence in his program had just become far more complicated. On the other side of the base, in her assigned barracks, Chen lay awake in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. She'd felt the weight of observation all day, had noticed Captain Rodriguez's careful attention, had sensed the ripples her presence was creating. She'd known this posting wouldn't give her the anonymity she craved, but she'd hoped, foolishly perhaps, that she could fade into the background long enough to find some semblance of peace. That hope was already fading. The morning of day 12 started like any other. Chen moved through the pre-dawn routine with mechanical precision. 0430 wake-up, PT formation at 500, breakfast at 6:30, classroom instruction at 7:30. The rhythm of military life had always been comforting in its predictability, a stark contrast to the chaos of her previous assignment where every day had meant navigating a minefield of deception and danger. Today's schedule called for urban combat simulation in Building 7, a 3-story structure designed to mimic the close-quarters battle environments of Middle Eastern cities. The training facility was a maze of narrow corridors, staircases, and rooms filled with props and pop-up targets. Instructors controlled the scenarios from an observation room, introducing complications through speakers and remote-controlled devices. Chen's squad of 8 recruits gathered outside the building at 900, checking their training weapons, M4 rifles modified to fire marking rounds. Staff Sergeant Davis, their primary instructor, briefed them on the scenario: hostage rescue, unknown number of enemy combatants, civilian non-combatants present. Standard stuff. Remember, Davis barked, his voice carrying across the assembly area, this is about teamwork and communication. I don't care if you're the best shooter in the army. If you can't work with your team, you're useless in close quarters. Clear. Yes, Staff Sergeant, the squad shouted in unison. Chen checked her weapon for the third time, a habit ingrained from missions where a malfunction meant death rather than a failed training score. Around her, the other recruits bounced on their toes, adrenaline already flowing. She recognized the energy, young soldiers eager to prove themselves, to show they belonged in this elite program. From the observation room 300 yards away, Colonel Hartwell stood beside Captain Rodriguez, watching through the reinforced windows. He'd made a point of observing Chen's training over the past week and a half, though he'd kept his distance, heeding the warning from his mysterious phone contact. But he couldn't stop watching, couldn't stop trying to reconcile the unremarkable recruit with the highly classified warrior her file suggested. "Squad, move out," Davis commanded. The 8 recruits stacked up at the building's entrance, Chen positioned fourth in the formation. The team leader, a young corporal named Matthews who'd been with the 82nd Airborne, used hand signals to coordinate their entry. They moved through the door in practice formation, weapons up, clearing the first room with textbook precision. Chen stayed in her lane, covering her sector, calling out clear when appropriate. Nothing exceptional, nothing that would draw attention. They advanced to the second floor, the narrow stairwell forcing them into single file. The building was silent except for their breathing and the soft padding of their boots on concrete. Too silent, Chen thought, her instincts prickling. In real combat, this kind of silence meant an ambush or... The explosion wasn't supposed to happen. One moment, the squad was moving through the second-floor corridor. The next, a section of ceiling 50 feet ahead gave way with a grinding roar. The sound of metal tearing and concrete cracking filled the air as a support beam, weakened by years of repeated training stress and inadequate maintenance, finally failed. Debris crashed down and Chen heard screaming. Fall back, Matthews shouted, but 3 members of the squad had been ahead of the collapse point. They were cut off, and worse, Chen could see through the settling dust that at least 2 of them were down, partially buried under chunks of concrete and twisted metal. In the observation room, Hartwell's blood went cold. "Get emergency response in there now," he shouted, already moving toward the door. Rodriguez was on her radio, calling for medical and engineering teams. Back in Building 7, chaos erupted. Matthews was frozen, his training not covering structural collapse during simulation. The other recruits were backing away from the debris, some calling out to their trapped teammates, others simply staring in shock. And then Chen moved. The change was instantaneous and complete. The carefully maintained facade of an average recruit shattered as decades of training and 18 months of operating in actual combat zones took over. She dropped her training rifle and assessed the situation with the rapid calculation of someone who'd made life-and-death decisions in seconds. "You 3 find fire extinguishers, now." Her voice cracked like a whip, carrying an authority that made the recruits obey before they realized they were taking orders from a peer. "Matthews, get on the radio and tell them we need structural engineers and medical. We have personnel trapped under unstable debris. Move." Matthews blinked, then fumbled for his radio. Chen was already at the debris pile, her eyes scanning for the safest approach. She could see Private Jackson's leg protruding from under a concrete slab, and beyond him, she heard Private Kimura calling for help, his voice weak and pained. A small fire had started where electrical wiring had been exposed, and smoke was beginning to fill the corridor. "Jackson, can you hear me?" Chen called out, already calculating load-bearing points and collapse risks. "My leg, I can't feel my leg." His voice was tight with pain and fear. The recruits returned with fire extinguishers. Chen pointed at the small fire. "Put that out, Then get ready to move debris when I tell you, not before." She dropped to her stomach and crawled into a gap in the rubble, her movements precise and controlled. This was different from the obstacle courses, different from the measured performances of the past 12 days. This was Chen as she really was, an operator who'd crawled through bombed-out buildings in Mosul, who'd extracted wounded allies under fire, who'd navigated danger with the calm focus of someone who'd done it before and survived. "Kimura, where are you hurt?" she called into the darkness. "My arm, something's on my arm, I can't move." His voice came from deeper in the rubble. Chen's mind worked through the problem like an equation. The main support beam had fallen at an angle, creating a pocket where Kimura was trapped but also holding up several tons of concrete that would crush him if it shifted wrong. Jackson was pinned but accessible. Priority: stabilize, then extract. She backed out and grabbed Matthews. "Listen to me carefully. We need to create a crib under that beam to stabilize it before we move anything. There are wooden pallets in the storage area. Get them, along with any metal pipes you can find. We have maybe 10 minutes before this whole section comes down." "How do you?" "Matthews, I don't have time to explain. Trust me or don't, but if you want them alive, do exactly what I say." Something in her eyes, the absolute certainty, the complete absence of fear, convinced him. He ran. Chen turned to the remaining recruits. "You," she pointed to a young private named Tors, "you're small. I need you to crawl in after me with a medical kit. Can you do that?" Tors was pale but nodded. "Good. When we get to Kimura, you're going to assess his injuries and prepare him for movement. I'll handle the structural problem." In the observation room, Hartwell had reached the building's entrance just as the emergency response team arrived. But through the windows, he could see what was happening on the second floor, and what he saw made him stop. Chen was directing the operation with the precision of a seasoned combat engineer and the authority of a field commander. Recruits twice her size were following her orders without question, moving with purpose instead of panic. She transformed from an unremarkable trainee into someone else entirely, someone who'd clearly done this before in situations far more dangerous than a training accident. "Sir, should we pull them out?" Rodriguez asked, breathing hard from the sprint. Hartwell watched Chen crawl back into the debris field, Tors following her. "Not yet. She knows what she's doing." Matthews returned with the pallets and pipes. Following Chen's instructions, delivered in calm, clear commands from inside the rubble, the recruits built a cribbing structure under the fallen beam. Chen had Tors treating Kimura's injuries while she used a piece of rebar as a lever, shifting weight off the trapped soldier inch by careful inch. "On my count, pull him out," she called. 3, 2, 1 now." Kimura emerged, his arm badly bruised but not broken. The team had him clear of the debris within seconds. Chen backed out and moved to Jackson. The concrete slab on his leg was massive, easily 300 pounds. She examined the situation, then wedged the rebar under the slab at the optimal leverage point. "When I lift, you drag him clear. No hesitation, we won't get a second chance." She positioned herself, planted her feet, and lifted. The slab rose 6 inches, just enough. Hands grabbed Jackson and pulled him free as Chen held the weight, every muscle straining. The moment he was clear, she released the bar and rolled away as the slab crashed back down. By the time the emergency response team reached the second floor, all 3 trapped soldiers were out of the debris field, their injuries assessed and treated with the basic first aid available. The fire was extinguished. The remaining recruits were positioned safely away from the unstable structure. And Chen was standing among them, breathing hard, covered in dust and sweat, looking like just another recruit who'd been through a traumatic experience. But Colonel Hartwell had seen the truth. He'd watched the whole thing on the security monitors, had seen the transformation from invisible soldier to expert operator and back again. As medics loaded the injured onto stretchers, all 3 would recover fully, Hartwell approached the group. His eyes found Chen immediately. She met his gaze and knew, in that instant, that her carefully constructed anonymity was gone forever. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Hartwell said quietly, his voice carrying only to her. "My office, 1 hour." "Yes, sir." The reckoning she'd been avoiding had finally arrived. Colonel Hartwell sat alone in his office, the door locked, the blinds drawn. On his desk lay a yellow legal pad covered in handwritten notes, names, dates, fragments of information pieced together from a dozen sources. He'd spent the last 48 hours calling in every favor he'd accumulated over 4 decades of service, and what he'd found was a puzzle with most of its pieces deliberately missing. But some pieces remained. He picked up his secure phone and dialed a number in McLean, Virginia, a former student who'd gone on to work at CIA. The phone rang 4 times before a cautious voice answered. "Jim, I told you I can't talk about this." "I'm not asking you to confirm anything classified, David. I'm asking you to listen." Hartwell kept his voice level. 18 months ago, there was a raid in northwestern Syria that took out a high-value target, an ISIS financial coordinator who'd been ghost for 2 years. The intel came from inside the organization, someone embedded deep. Silence on the other end. 6 months before that, Hartwell continued, there was chatter about a planned attack on the embassy in Baghdad. It was stopped because someone provided specific details about the timing and method. Again, inside information. Jim. And 14 months ago, a female aid worker was kidnapped by an extremist cell in Yemen. She was recovered in a joint operation, but the after-action reports I could access were heavily redacted. The only detail that wasn't classified was that the rescue was made possible by someone who provided real-time intelligence from inside the compound. More silence. "David, I'm not asking you to violate your clearance. I just need to know if I'm putting pieces together that shouldn't be assembled." A long exhale came through the phone. "Jim, if I were to speak hypothetically, and I mean purely hypothetically, I would say that certain operations require assets that don't fit traditional profiles. People who can go places others can't, who can gain trust in environments where a male operative would be killed on sight. Female operatives embedded in extremist organizations." Hypothetically, David's voice was careful, and hypothetically, such operations would be extremely dangerous. The kind of dangerous where even surviving would leave marks, physical and psychological. The kind of dangerous where the people who do it deserve whatever peace they can find afterward. And if such a person wanted to leave that world behind, then hypothetically, Jim, you should let them, because the cost of that kind of service is higher than most people can imagine. A pause. "I have to go. Don't call this number again about this topic." The line went dead. Hartwell set down the phone and picked up a printout, a news article from a Middle Eastern publication, dated 20 months prior. The headline read, "Aid Worker Adapts to Local Customs in Remote Region." The accompanying photo showed a woman in traditional dress, her face partially covered, distributing medical supplies to children in a refugee camp. The woman's eyes were barely visible, but Hartwell had stared at the photo long enough to convince himself he saw something familiar in them. The article mentioned a relief worker named Mariam, who had gained unusual access to conservative communities by embracing local customs and learning the language. Reading between the lines, Hartwell could see the cover story, an aid worker who could move freely in places where Western intelligence agencies couldn't penetrate. His next call was to an old friend at the Pentagon, a 1-star general who'd served with Hartwell in the Gulf War. They spoke carefully, dancing around classified topics, but the general confirmed what Hartwell had begun to suspect. "There's a program, Jim, very small, very specialized, uses personnel with specific skill sets for deep cover operations in denied areas. The people who volunteer for it understand that their service will never be publicly acknowledged. If they're successful, their work saves lives, but nobody knows their names. If they're compromised. The general didn't finish the sentence. The silver star your recruit carries, that's probably for an action that will never be declassified. The Purple Hearts. She earned those in a place we officially weren't operating. Why would someone like that end up in a basic training program? Maybe because after living in constant danger for 18 months, pretending to be someone else every waking moment, she wanted to remember what it felt like to be a regular soldier. Maybe she's burned out, or maybe she's trying to prove to herself that she can still function in a normal environment. The general's voice softened. Jim, I've known you long enough to understand you want to do right by your people. The best thing you can do for this one is give her what she came there for, a chance to be normal. After the call ended, Hartwell stood and walked to his window. Below, he could see recruits running formation drills, their movements synchronized and purposeful. Somewhere among them was Chen, back in uniform, back in formation, pretending that 2 days ago she hadn't commanded a rescue operation with the skill of a seasoned combat veteran. He returned to his desk and opened a locked drawer, withdrawing a thin file folder marked with classification stamps. Inside was a single document he'd received via secure fax an hour earlier, a response to his official inquiry through proper channels, requesting Chen's complete service record. The response was brief. Colonel Hartwell, your request for complete service records regarding SSG Maya Chen is DENIED. SSG Chen's previous assignments fall under Special Access Program protocols. No further information can be provided without authorization from ODNI. However, we can confirm that SSG Chen's current assignment to your training program is authorized and appropriate. She is to be assessed on current performance only. Her previous service, while exemplary, is not relevant to her current training cycle. Request that you cease inquiries that could compromise ongoing operations. Respectfully, redacted, Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Hartwell read the letter for the 5th time. The message was clear. Back off, stop asking questions, pretend you don't know what you know. But there was another document in the folder, this one obtained through less official channels. A former colleague in Special Operations had sent it with a note. Jim, this is as much as I could find. It's not much, but maybe it helps you understand. Burn after reading. The document was a brief psychological evaluation, portions of it redacted, dated 3 months prior. Subject demonstrates exceptional resilience but shows signs of sustained operational stress. 18 months of deep cover in hostile environment has resulted in hypervigilance, difficulty with trust, and persistent situational awareness inappropriate for garrison environment. Subject reports difficulty turning off operational mindset. Recommendation: temporary assignment to low-stress environment to allow psychological decompression. Subject has requested assignment to conventional training program. While unconventional, this may provide therapeutic benefit by allowing her to reintegrate into normal military structure without operational pressure. The pieces were falling into place. Chen hadn't been sent to his program as a recruit. She'd requested it. She was here because after 18 months of living a lie in one of the most dangerous environments imaginable, she needed to remember how to be a soldier without constantly calculating survival odds. She was here to heal. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Enter. Captain Rodriguez stepped inside. Sir, Staff Sergeant Chen is here for her appointment. Hartwell glanced at the clock. It had been exactly 1 hour since he'd summoned her. Of course it had. Someone like Chen would be precisely on time. Send her in. And Captain, close the door behind you. This conversation is private. Rodriguez nodded and withdrew. A moment later, Chen entered, standing at attention before his desk. She'd showered and changed into a fresh uniform, every detail perfect. But Hartwell could see the tension in her shoulders, the guardedness in her eyes. She knew this conversation was coming. She'd probably been preparing for it since the moment she pulled those recruits from the rubble. "At ease, Staff Sergeant, have a seat." Chen sat, her posture straight, hands folded in her lap. She waited, saying nothing, her face professionally neutral. Hartwell studied her for a long moment. Here was a woman who'd volunteered for one of the most dangerous assignments imaginable, who'd lived among enemy combatants for months, who'd risked everything to gather intelligence that saved American lives. And now she sat before him, pretending to be just another soldier. "I'm not going to ask you about your previous assignment," he said finally. "I know I won't get answers, and frankly, I've been strongly advised to stop asking questions." Chen's shoulders relaxed fractionally, the first genuine reaction he'd seen. "But I am going to tell you what I've figured out." Hartwell leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. "You were somewhere we officially weren't, doing something that can't be acknowledged. You earned those medals on your chest in ways that will never be public record. And for reasons I can only partially understand, you requested assignment to my training program despite being far more qualified than anyone else in your class." Chen met his gaze steadily, but said nothing. "Here's what I need to know, Staff Sergeant, and this isn't about satisfying my curiosity. It's about properly serving my personnel. Why are you here? What are you looking for?" For a long moment, Chen remained silent. Then slowly she spoke. "Permission to speak freely, sir." "Granted." "I'm here," she said carefully, "because I need to remember what it feels like to be a soldier instead of—" She paused, choosing her words with obvious care. "Instead of always being someone else." Hartwell nodded slowly. "And the rescue operation 2 days ago, that wasn't you being someone else. That was you being exactly who you are." "Yes, sir. And that's the problem." Silence in Colonel Hartwell's office stretched between them like a taut wire. Outside, the sounds of Fort Bragg continued, distant cadence calls, the rumble of vehicles, the everyday rhythm of military life. Inside, 2 soldiers sat across from each other, separated by a desk and by experiences that couldn't be easily bridged. Chen's admission hung in the air. "That's the problem." Hartwell removed his reading glasses and set them on the desk. "Explain." Chen's jaw tightened slightly. She'd spent 18 months guarding every word, measuring every gesture, maintaining a cover identity that meant the difference between life and death. The habit of careful speech was hard to break. "For a year and a half, sir, I was never myself. Every conversation was calculated. Every relationship was transactional. Every smile was a tool." Her voice remained steady, but Hartwell heard something underneath, a weariness that went bone deep. "I spoke a language that wasn't mine, practiced a religion I didn't believe in, befriended people I knew I might have to betray, and I was good at it." "The Silver Star suggests you were more than good at it." Chen's eyes flicked to the medals on her dress uniform, hanging on the coat rack in the corner. "Those medals represent a day when everything I'd built over months nearly collapsed, when I had to make a choice between maintaining my cover and saving lives." She paused. "I saved the lives, sir. It was the right call, but it meant burning my position. I had to be extracted under fire." Hartwell nodded, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The aid worker in Yemen. Chen's expression didn't change, but her silence was confirmation enough. "You provided the intelligence for the rescue operation," Hartwell continued, "but you were the one who needed rescuing too." "It was complicated, sir." Chen's hands, folded in her lap, tightened almost imperceptibly. "The woman they kidnapped worked for a legitimate NGO. She had no idea there was an intelligence operative embedded in the same community. When they took her, I had a choice: maintain my cover and gather intelligence on a high-value target who was using the kidnapping for leverage, or compromise my position to help rescue a civilian." "You chose the civilian." "I chose both, sir. I fed real-time intelligence to the rescue team while keeping my cover intact long enough for them to execute. But during the operation, one of the kidnappers recognized that the information could have only come from someone inside. I was exposed." She met Hartwell's eyes. The silver star was for holding my position during the firefight that followed, protecting the rescue team's extraction while they got the civilian out. The purple hearts were for the wounds I sustained doing it. Hartwell had seen enough combat to imagine the scene. A young woman, alone and exposed, fighting to cover the retreat of a rescue force while enemy combatants closed in. The courage that required was extraordinary. And after the extraction, medical treatment, debriefing, psychological evaluation. Then they offered me another assignment, a different region, different cover, same mission profile. Chen's voice was flat now, reciting facts. I declined, told them I needed time before I could go back under. They were understanding. They don't want burned-out operators making mistakes in the field. So they sent you here. I requested here, sir. I needed to prove to myself that I could still function as a regular soldier, that I hadn't lost that part of myself completely. She looked away, her gaze drifting to the window. For 18 months, everything was a performance. I'm tired of performing. Hartwell leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. But 2 days ago, you performed anyway. You took command of that rescue operation like you were born to it. That was different, sir. That was instinct, not calculation. Those soldiers were in danger and I had the training to help them. I didn't have to think about it, I just acted. Her voice carried a hint of frustration. That's what I mean about the problem. I came here to learn how to be normal again, to fade into the background and just be one soldier among many. But I can't turn it off. The training, the experience, it's who I am now. And you see that as a problem. Don't you, sir? Chen's eyes snapped back to his. I'm supposed to be a recruit in this program, learning alongside peers. Instead, I'm constantly holding back, measuring my responses, making sure I don't stand out too much. It's just another cover identity. I'm still performing. Hartwell stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. He watched the training grounds for a moment before speaking. Staff Sergeant, I'm going to tell you something and I want you to really hear it. What you did, what you sacrificed, that matters. Those 18 months you spent in hell, the intelligence you gathered, the lives you saved by risking your own, that's service at the highest level. I know that, sir, but you're exhausted, Hartwell interrupted, turning to face her. You're burned out and you're trying to find your way back to something that feels like solid ground. I understand that. He moved back to his desk but didn't sit. Here's what I think. You didn't come here to learn how to be a soldier. You already know that better than most of the instructors I have. You came here hoping that if you went through the motions long enough, you'd somehow become the person you're pretending to be. Chen's composure cracked slightly. Is that so wrong? It's impossible, Hartwell said, not unkindly. You can't unlearn what you know. You can't erase those experiences. And you shouldn't want to. What you can do is figure out how to integrate who you were, who you became, and who you want to be going forward. With respect, sir, that sounds like something from a psychology textbook. A slight smile crossed Hartwell's weathered face. It is. I've been reading a lot of them lately, trying to understand how to help soldiers returning from deployments. Turns out, you're not the first person to struggle with coming back from an extreme experience. He sat down, his expression serious again. The difference is most soldiers can talk about what they've been through. You can't. That makes it harder. I knew the job when I took it, sir. That doesn't make it less difficult. Hartwell picked up a pen, tapping it thoughtfully against his desk. Here's my assessment, Staff Sergeant. You have skills and experience that are extraordinary. You've proven yourself in situations most soldiers will never face. But right now, you need time to decompress, to figure out who Maya Chen is when she's not maintaining a cover identity or operating in a combat zone. That's what I'm trying to do here, sir. No, you're trying to hide here. There's a difference. Hartwell set down the pen. I run a program designed to identify and develop elite soldiers. I've watched you for 2 weeks now, and I've watched you deliberately underperform, deliberately make yourself invisible. That's not healing. That's just a different kind of cover. Chen was silent, but Hartwell could see his words landing. I'm going to make you an offer, he continued. And before you answer, I want you to understand that this comes from a place of respect for what you've done and what you've sacrificed. Several people have contacted me in the last 48 hours, people from agencies I can't name, offering positions that would put you right back in the field. Chen's expression tightened. Sir, I already told them. I know what you told them, and I'm not passing along those offers. Hartwell leaned forward. Instead, I'm offering you something different. I need instructors for this program, people who have operated at the highest levels, who can teach the next generation what real combat operations look like. It would mean staying here at Bragg, teaching advanced tactical intelligence, close-quarters combat, survival in hostile environments. You'd be using your experience without having to deploy back into the field. Chen stared at him, clearly not expecting this. It would be honest work, Hartwell continued. You wouldn't be hiding what you can do, you'd be passing it on. And maybe, in the process of teaching others, you'd figure out how to integrate all those pieces of yourself you're struggling with. I'm not qualified to be an instructor, sir. I'm just a staff sergeant. You're a staff sergeant with a silver star and experience that makes you more qualified than most majors I know. The rank can be adjusted if needed. The question is whether you want to do it. Chen was quiet for a long moment, her mind clearly working through the implications. What about my cover? If I'm teaching, people will ask questions about where I served, what I did. We'll work out a cover story that's close enough to the truth to be believable. You served in intelligence operations in denied areas. That's vague enough to satisfy curiosity without revealing specifics. The students don't need to know details. They need to learn from someone who's been there. And the people who want me back in the field. I'll handle them, Hartwell said firmly. You've given enough, Staff Sergeant. If you want to keep serving without going back under, I'll make sure that's respected. Chen looked at him, really looked at him, searching for some hidden angle, some manipulation. She'd spent too long in a world where everyone wanted something, where every offer came with strings attached. But Hartwell's eyes held only honest concern, the look of a commander who genuinely cared about his people. Can I think about it, sir? Take whatever time you need. But Chen, Hartwell's voice softened, stop hiding. You've earned the right to stand in the light. 3 days after the conversation in Hartwell's office, Chen still hadn't given him an answer. She moved through training with the same measured competence, but something had shifted. She was quieter, more introspective, as if weighing the weight of a decision that would determine the trajectory of her life. Then, on a humid Thursday morning, everything changed. The base-wide alert came at 6:20 hours, interrupting the breakfast formation. Every phone on Fort Bragg buzzed simultaneously with a priority message. THREATCON Charlie, credible threat of terrorist action against the installation. All non-essential personnel were to report to their units. Gates were locked down. Security forces mobilized. In the officers' club, Colonel Hartwell was already in an emergency briefing with base command. The conference room was packed with senior officers, intelligence personnel, and representatives from multiple federal agencies. A grim-faced FBI special agent stood at the front, a presentation displayed on the screen behind her. At 5:45 this morning, we intercepted communications indicating an imminent attack on Fort Bragg, Special Agent Victoria Martinez explained, her voice crisp and professional. The source is a domestic extremist cell we've been monitoring for 6 months. The concerning element is the specificity of the intelligence they possess. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a detailed layout of Fort Bragg's infrastructure: roads, buildings, security checkpoints, response protocols. This level of detail suggests inside knowledge, Martinez continued. Someone with intimate familiarity with this base's operations has been feeding information to hostile actors. We're dealing with either current personnel or someone who trained here and maintained access to updated information. Hartwell felt his jaw tighten. An insider threat was every commander's nightmare. What's the timeline? asked the base commander, a two-star general named Paulson. "We believe the attack is planned for within the next 72 hours. The target appears to be a high-value event or gathering, possibly the change of command ceremony scheduled for Saturday." Martinez pulled up another slide showing intercept fragments. The communications mention maximum impact and symbolic target. "We're treating this as credible and imminent." The briefing continued for another 30 minutes, outlining enhanced security measures, investigation protocols, and coordination between military and civilian law enforcement. When it concluded, Hartwell returned to his office, his mind churning through the implications. An insider threat, someone who knew Fort Bragg intimately. He was reviewing security protocols when Captain Rodriguez knocked and entered, her expression troubled. "Sir, I thought you should see this." She handed him a tablet showing the detailed threat assessment. Hartwell scanned the document, his eyes stopping on specific details about the leaked information. The insider knowledge included training schedules, security rotation patterns, and specific details about facility layouts, particularly Building 7, the Urban Combat Training Facility. Building 7, where the structural collapse had occurred 3 days ago. His mind made a connection. "Captain, pull the training records for Building 7. I want to know everyone who's trained there in the last 5 years." "Sir, that's thousands of soldiers." "I know, but this level of detailed knowledge about our training facilities, our protocols, it's not current personnel. Current personnel wouldn't need to leak information about their own base. They'd have access. This is someone who left, someone who trained here and retained detailed knowledge." Rodriguez nodded, understanding. Someone who washed out or was discharged. Or someone who completed training and left under circumstances that might breed resentment. Hartwell stood, packing to his window. "The FBI is looking at this as a broad investigation, but we can narrow the field. Cross-reference personnel who trained in Building 7 with anyone who left the service under adverse conditions in the past 4 years." "That's still a significant list, sir." "Then we start there and work our way down." Rodriguez left to begin the data pull, and Hartwell stood alone, staring out at the base. Somewhere out there was someone who knew Fort Bragg well enough to help plan an attack against it. The thought was infuriating and deeply personal. He'd spent his career building soldiers, training them to defend the nation. The idea that one of them might have turned against that mission was a betrayal that cut deep. His phone rang. It was Captain Rodriguez, her voice urgent. "Sir, you need to come to the operations center, now." 5 minutes later, Hartwell entered the operations center where Rodriguez had set up a workstation. Multiple screens displayed data feeds, personnel records, and threat assessments. "I started the cross-reference like you asked," Rodriguez explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Training records from Building 7 against personnel who separated under adverse conditions. The list came back with 43 names." "That's manageable. Start vetting." "Sir, I went a step further. I looked at the pattern of leaked information." She pulled up a document showing the specific details the extremist cell possessed. "The information isn't just about current protocols, it's about protocols from a specific time frame. The training schedules they referenced are from 4 years ago. The security patterns match what we had in place during 2021, not current rotations." Hartwell leaned closer. "They're working from old intelligence." "Exactly. Which means our insider likely trained here around that time and hasn't had access to updated information. So I narrowed the search. Personnel who trained in Building 7 specifically during the 2021 training cycles and separated from service within 2 years of that training." The list on the screen showed 3 names. "Run background on all 3, Hartwell ordered. "Social media, current location, any red flags." A knock at the door interrupted them. Hartwell turned to see Staff Sergeant Chen standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Sir, permission to speak with you privately." Hartwell exchanged a glance with Rodriguez, then nodded. Captain, continue the background checks. Chen, my office. They walked in silence across the building. Once inside his office with the door closed, Chen remained standing, her posture rigid. Sir, I heard about the threat assessment, the leaked information about base operations. That's classified, Staff Sergeant. How did you? Word spreads, sir. Soldiers talk. Chen's eyes were sharp, focused. I reviewed what's publicly known about the threat, and something about the pattern bothers me. Hartwell studied her. What pattern? The information being leaked isn't just detailed. It's specific in a particular way. It's the kind of intelligence someone would gather if they were planning an infiltration operation, not a direct attack. She moved to his desk, pulling up the threat assessment on his computer with quick, practiced movements that suggested familiarity with intelligence analysis. Look at what they have: entry points, security rotations, building layouts. But they don't have current personnel rosters, they don't have updated security protocols, and they don't have information about recent infrastructure changes. We've already identified that the information appears dated. It's more than dated, sir. It's targeted. Chen's finger traced across the screen. This isn't someone who left the service and stayed angry. This is someone who was specifically gathering this type of information while they were here, someone who was always planning to use it later. Hartwell felt a chill. You're saying we're not looking for someone who turned against us after leaving. We're looking for someone who was already compromised while they were training here. Yes, sir, someone who came here specifically to gather intelligence. Chen looked up at him. This is tradecraft, Colonel. This is how you build a target package for an operation. I've seen it before. Where? Chen's expression was carefully neutral. In places where people were planning attacks on American facilities. The methodology is the same. Embed someone in the target environment. Have them gather detailed information under the cover of legitimate activity, then extract them before they're identified. Hartwell's mind raced. If Chen was right, they weren't looking for a disgruntled veteran. They were looking for a sleeper agent who'd infiltrated Fort Bragg years ago. The three names Captain Rodriguez identified, Chen continued. I'd need to see them to offer any assessment, but I might be able to identify behavioral patterns that fit the profile. Why are you offering this, Staff Sergeant? You came here to get away from intelligence work. Chen's jaw set. Because if someone is planning to attack this base, they're planning to attack my fellow soldiers. That changes things. She met his eyes. You offered me a position as an instructor, sir. You said I could serve without going back into the field. But this is different. This is using my experience to protect people. That's something I can live with. Hartwell made a decision. Come with me. They returned to the operations center, where Captain Rodriguez had pulled up detailed files on the three suspects. Chen moved to the screens, her eyes scanning the information with the practiced efficiency of an experienced analyst. The first name, Specialist Robert Hayes, separated 2022, general discharge, currently working construction in Arizona. Social media showed a normal life, family photos, sports posts, nothing unusual. The second name, Corporal Jennifer Liu, separated 2021, medical discharge for knee injury, currently attending college in California. Her digital footprint showed activism, strong political opinions, but nothing extremist. The third name, Private First Class Marcus Webb, separated 2021, other than honorable discharge following multiple discipline issues, current location unknown. Chen's eyes stopped on Webb's file. Sir, pull up his training records, specifically his performance evaluations and any behavioral notes. Rodriguez pulled up the files. Webb's record showed consistently poor performance, multiple Article 15s for minor infractions, and notes from his chain of command describing him as unmotivated and resistant to authority. This one, Chen said quietly, this is your insider. How can you be sure? Hartwell asked. Because he's too perfect, Chen replied. Look at this pattern. Just enough problems to seem like a legitimate washout, but nothing serious enough to trigger a security investigation. Multiple small infractions spread over time, creating a narrative of someone who doesn't fit military life. It's exactly the kind of cover you'd build if you wanted to leave service without raising suspicion. She pulled up his training timeline. And look at this. He cycled through multiple training programs before washing out. Each one gave him access to different facilities, different protocols. He wasn't here to become a soldier. He was here to map the base. Hartwell felt the pieces clicking together. We need to find him, now. But Chen was already scrolling through the file, her expression darkening. Sir, his last known address is flagged as inactive. No employment records for the past 18 months. No digital footprint since he separated. He's gone dark, Rodriguez said. Not just dark, Chen corrected. He's operational, and if my assessment is correct, he's somewhere close to Fort Bragg right now, preparing to guide an attack he's been planning for 4 years. The operations center transformed into a command hub within the hour. FBI agents, military intelligence personnel, and base security forces crowded around workstations, each team pursuing different angles on Marcus Webb. But it was Chen who sat at the center of the investigation, her fingers moving across keyboards with the fluid precision of someone who'd done this kind of work before, in far more dangerous circumstances. Colonel Hartwell stood behind her, watching as she constructed a digital profile of their target. Captain Rodriguez coordinated with external agencies, her phone pressed to her ear as she requested warrant approvals and surveillance authorizations. Webb's last known vehicle was a 2015 Ford F-150, registered in North Carolina, Chen said, pulling up DMV records. But he sold it 6 months after his discharge, paid cash for the transaction, no digital trail. Classic pattern for someone going off-grid, observed Special Agent Martinez, who joined them at Hartwell's request. What else? Chen's eyes never left the screen. His bank account shows regular deposits until 18 months ago, small amounts, consistent with low-wage employment. Then the deposits stop, but there are no closure records. The account just goes dormant. He switched to cash economy, Martinez said. Makes him harder to track. But not impossible. Chen pulled up a different database, social media analytics. Before he went dark, Webb had minimal online presence, but he was active in certain forums, anti-government rhetoric mostly. Nothing that would have flagged him at the time, but looking at it now with context. She highlighted specific posts. He was asking questions. Specific questions about building security, emergency response protocols, event planning for military ceremonies. Hartwell leaned closer. He was gathering information even after he left. No, sir, he was confirming information. There's a difference. Chen's expression was grim. When you're planning an operation, you gather initial intelligence, then you verify it closer to execution. Webb gathered his target package while he was here. These forum posts from 18 months ago, that's him beginning final preparation. Which means he's been planning this specific attack for at least that long, Martinez concluded. Rodriguez hung up her phone. FBI just sent over cell tower data from Webb's last known phone. It was disconnected 2 years ago, but the historical data shows a pattern. Before he went dark, he made regular trips to the Fayetteville area, specifically to locations within 5 miles of Fort Bragg. Chen pulled up a map, plotting the cell tower hits. A pattern emerged. Webb had made repeated visits to 3 specific locations: a storage facility on Bragg Boulevard, a motel near the All-American Freeway, and a gun shop in Spring Lake. The gun shop is obvious, Hartwell said. What about the storage facility? That's where he'd keep operational materials, Chen replied, already typing commands to pull rental records. Equipment, supplies, anything he didn't want stored at a permanent residence. She paused, her eyes widening slightly. Sir, the storage facility shows an active rental under a different name, Marcus Thompson. Same initials, different surname. It's a common alias technique. Martinez was already on her phone, requesting a warrant. How fast can we get eyes on that location? We can have a surveillance team there in 20 minutes, Rodriguez said. Do it, Hartwell ordered, but maintain distance. If Webb's there, I don't want him spooked. Chen shook her head. He won't be there, sir, not during daylight hours. If he's operational, he's maintaining discipline, minimal exposure, nocturnal movement patterns. She pulled up satellite imagery of the storage facility. But the unit number from the rental records, Unit 147, it's in the back corner of the facility. Limited visibility from the street, multiple exit routes. That's deliberate positioning. You sound very certain about his methodology, Martinez observed, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. Chen met her gaze without flinching. I've tracked people who use these techniques before, Agent Martinez. The patterns are consistent. There was a moment of silent assessment between the two women. The FBI agent evaluating the Army staff sergeant, who seemed to know far too much about operational tradecraft. Hartwell intervened. What we need is a way to draw him out. If he's planning an attack tied to Saturday's ceremony, he'll need to conduct final reconnaissance. That's our window. We could plant false information, Rodriguez suggested. Make him think security protocols have changed, force him to verify. No, Chen interrupted, then caught herself. With respect, Captain, if Webb is as trained as I think he is, he'll smell a trap. We need something more subtle. She turned to Hartwell. Sir, the change of command ceremony, what's the current security plan? Hartwell pulled up the file. Standard protocols for a high-visibility event. Perimeter security, credentialing for attendees, vehicle searches, counter-sniper teams on the rooftops. Chen studied the plan, her mind clearly working through multiple scenarios. Webb knows these protocols. He's counting on standard security because standard security has predictable gaps. What if we give him something unexpected, something that would require him to adjust his plan? Like what? Martinez asked. Like announcing a VIP attendee who wasn't originally on the schedule. Someone whose presence would trigger elevated security protocols that Webb hasn't accounted for. Chen looked at Hartwell. If we leak information, carefully, through channels we know extremist groups monitor, that a senior Pentagon official or a high-profile political figure will be attending, Webb would need to reassess. He'd need to verify the security changes. And we'd be watching for anyone conducting that kind of reconnaissance, Martinez finished, understanding dawning. It's a baited trap. It's a target package modification trigger, Chen corrected. We're not trying to catch him in the act of reconnaissance. We're trying to force him into a digital footprint. If he believes the security situation has changed, he'll need to communicate with his cell members, coordinate adjustments. That communication is where we catch him. Hartwell nodded slowly. It's risky if we're wrong about his methodology. We're not wrong, sir. Chen's voice carried absolute certainty. I've seen this exact pattern before, multiple times. Webb is following a standard operational template for this type of attack. The question is whether we can move fast enough to intercept him before execution. Rodriguez checked her watch. It's 1400 hours now. The ceremony is in 48 hours. That's not much time. Then we need to move now, Martinez said. She turned to Chen. You've clearly done this kind of work before, Staff Sergeant. I'm going to need your full cooperation on this operation. You have it, Agent Martinez. Good. Then let's build the trap. Martinez moved to a whiteboard, beginning to sketch out the operational plan. We'll need to coordinate the information leak carefully, make it look organic, not planted. We'll need monitoring on all channels Webb might use to communicate. And we'll need rapid response teams positioned to move the moment we get a hit on his location. For the next 3 hours, they constructed an elaborate intelligence operation. Chen worked alongside FBI analysts, providing insights into how someone with Webb's training would likely respond to different scenarios. She suggested specific monitoring protocols, recommended communication channels to watch, and identified behavioral patterns that would indicate Webb was taking the bait. Hartwell watched her work, seeing yet another facet of the woman who'd arrived at his program as an unremarkable recruit. This wasn't the careful, measured performance he'd observed during training. This was Chen in her element, sharp, decisive, drawing on experience that ran deep and dark. At 1700 hours, they activated the operation. A carefully crafted press release announced that the Undersecretary of Defense would be attending Saturday's change of command ceremony, a last-minute addition to his schedule. The announcement was pushed through official channels and deliberately leaked to social media accounts known to be monitored by extremist groups. Then they waited. The operations center fell into the tense silence of experienced professionals monitoring for signals in noise. Analysts watched data streams, looking for any spike in chatter or communication patterns that might indicate Webb had taken the bait. At 1842 hours, they got their first hit. "Sir, we have activity at the storage facility," called out one of the surveillance team members monitoring the location. Single male, approximately 6 feet tall, arriving in a dark sedan with obscured plates. Chen moved to the monitor showing the grainy surveillance feed. The figure was partially obscured by shadows, but his movement patterns, the way he scanned his surroundings before approaching the unit, the practiced efficiency of his entry, told her everything she needed to know. "That's him," she said quietly. "That's our target." Martinez was already issuing orders. "All units, we have positive ID on subject. Maintain surveillance, do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. We need to see what he does next." On the monitor, Webb entered the storage unit. Through thermal imaging, they could see him moving around inside, accessing equipment. "He's gearing up," Chen said. "The announcement about the VIP attendee triggered exactly what we thought it would. He's modifying his plan, pulling additional resources." "Can we take him now?" Rodriguez asked. "Not yet," Martinez said. "We need to identify his entire cell. If we grab Webb now, the others go to ground and we're back to square one." Chen nodded agreement. "He'll need to meet with them to coordinate the changes. That's when we'll have our best chance to roll up the entire network." They watched as Webb spent 18 minutes inside the storage unit, then emerged carrying a dark duffel bag. He placed it in his trunk, scanned the area one final time, and drove away. "All units, subject is mobile," Martinez announced. "Maintain surveillance at distance. Do not lose him." The hunt had truly begun, and somewhere out there in the darkness, Marcus Webb was moving toward what he thought would be a successful attack. He had no idea that every step he took was being watched, analyzed, and anticipated by a woman who'd hunted far more dangerous prey in far more hostile environments. Chen stood in the operations center, her eyes locked on the tracking data, and for the first time since arriving at Fort Bragg, she felt something she hadn't expected: purpose. Not the hollow performance of blending in, not the exhausting maintenance of a cover identity, but the clear, focused purpose of using her skills to protect people who mattered. This was what she'd been trained for. And this time, she wouldn't be alone in the dark. The surveillance lasted through the night. Webb drove a careful route through Fayetteville, making counter-surveillance stops that confirmed his training. He parked at a 24-hour diner on Bragg Boulevard at 21:47 hours, entering alone but choosing a booth with clear sightlines to the entrance, another tactical decision that Chen recognized immediately. "He's meeting someone," she said, watching the video feed from FBI surveillance units positioned around the diner. "He'll wait for them to arrive, verify they weren't followed, then make contact." 18 minutes later, 2 men entered separately, one in his 30s wearing contractor casual, the other younger, maybe mid-20s, with the nervous energy of someone new to operational work. They took different booths, ordered coffee, waited. Webb remained motionless, watching. That's classic cell compartmentalization, Chen observed. They know each other, but they're confirming security before acknowledging the connection. After another 10 minutes, Webb stood and walked to the restroom. The older man followed 30 seconds later. The younger one remained seated, clearly serving as counter-surveillance. "They're communicating in the restroom," Martinez said. "No cameras in there. We won't have audio." "We don't need it," Chen replied. "This is final coordination. Webb just confirmed the modifications to the plan. When they leave, they'll split up and move to separate safe houses. That's when your teams need to move. Simultaneous raids, no chance for warnings." Martinez nodded, already coordinating with tactical teams positioned throughout the city. "How many more do you think there are?" Chen studied the two men on the surveillance feeds. "These three are operational, the ones who will execute the attack, but there's probably at least one more serving as logistics support, someone clean who can move freely if the operational team is compromised. 4 total, maybe 5. The meeting lasted exactly 7 minutes. Webb emerged first, paid his bill in cash, and left. The two other men departed separately over the next 15 minutes, each taking different routes. FBI surveillance teams tracked all three. By 2:30 hours, they'd identified 2 safe houses, an apartment in Spring Lake where Webb had been staying under a false name, and a rented house in Hope Mills where the other 2 men were based. The younger man led them to a third location, a storage unit different from Webb's, registered to a name that cross-referenced to known associates of domestic extremist groups. "We have enough," Martinez announced at 400 hours. "All tactical teams execute raids simultaneously at my mark. We go in 5 minutes." Chen watched the preparation with the detached professionalism of someone who'd seen operations like this before, though usually from a very different perspective. Tactical teams checked equipment, reviewed floor plans, coordinated timing. The operations center fell into the focused silence that preceded action. 3, 2, 1. "Execute, execute, execute," Martinez commanded. The raids happened simultaneously across 3 locations. Body camera feeds showed tactical teams breaching doors, clearing rooms with practiced efficiency. At the Hope Mills house, the 2 men surrendered immediately, overwhelmed by the sudden assault. At the storage unit, investigators found detailed plans for the attack, maps of Fort Bragg, photographs of the ceremony venue, and materials for constructing vehicle-borne explosives. But at Webb's apartment in Spring Lake, the feed showed an empty room. Clothes still in the closet, food in the refrigerator, but no occupant. "Webb's not here," the tactical team leader reported. "Location is clear, but it looks like he left in a hurry. Recent disturbance, coffee still warm on the counter." Chen's stomach dropped. He made us. Somehow he knew we were coming. Martinez was already issuing new orders. "Lock down Fort Bragg immediately. Webb is in the wind and may attempt to execute independently. All units, consider subject armed and extremely dangerous." The next 6 hours were a blur of activity. Base security locked down every gate. Counter-sniper teams deployed to cover the ceremony venue. Investigators interrogated the captured cell members, but they claimed Webb had compartmentalized the operation. They knew their specific roles but not his full plan. At 10:30 hours, with the ceremony less than 24 hours away, they were still hunting Webb. Chen had been awake for over 28 hours, running on coffee and adrenaline, when Colonel Hartwell pulled her aside. They stood on the observation deck overlooking the base, watching increased security patrols move through the streets below. "You should get some rest, Staff Sergeant," he said quietly. "I'll rest when he's caught, sir." Chen's eyes scanned the base with professional paranoia, seeing potential attack vectors everywhere. "He's still out there, and he's probably watching right now, trying to figure out if he can still execute. The FBI thinks he'll abort. With his cell compromised, the smart move is to disappear. Webb didn't spend 4 years planning this just to walk away. Chen shook her head. He's committed. The question is whether he'll try to execute the original plan or improvise something simpler. Hartwell studied her profile, the dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the hypervigilance that radiated from every line of her body. You've been incredible through this whole operation. The FBI is impressed, my staff is impressed, and I'm impressed. But Chen, you're running on empty. I'm fine, sir. No, you're not. And that's okay, nobody could be fine after what you've been through. He paused, choosing his words carefully. When this is over, when Webb is caught and the threat is neutralized, you're going to crash. The adrenaline will fade and everything you've been holding back will hit you all at once. I've seen it happen to soldiers after extended operations. Chen finally looked at him. Is this the part where you tell me I need counseling, sir? This is the part where I tell you that what you've done over the past 48 hours proves something important. You don't have to choose between being who you were and who you want to be. You can be both. Before Chen could respond, Captain Rodriguez appeared, her phone in hand. Sir, we have a hit. Webb just used a credit card, his real identity, not an alias, at a gas station 3 miles from Fort Bragg. Chen's tactical mind immediately recognized the significance. That's deliberate. He wants us to know where he is. It's a diversion, Martinez said, joining them. Classic misdirection. Send our resources to investigate the credit card hit while he moves on the actual target from a different direction. Or it's an invitation, Chen said slowly, pieces clicking together in her mind. Webb knows we're hunting him. He knows his cell is compromised. But he also knows we don't understand his full plan. What if he wants to negotiate? Hartwell's eyes narrowed. You think he'd try to bargain? I think he's a true believer who spent 4 years planning an attack that's falling apart. Right now, he's desperate and dangerous, exactly the kind of person who might try one last play. Chen turned to Martinez. Let me go to the gas station, alone. If Webb is trying to make contact, he'll be more likely to approach a single person than a tactical team. Absolutely not, Martinez said flatly. You're not trained for hostage negotiation, and we're not using you as bait. With respect, Agent Martinez, I've been bait before, and I'm very good at it. Chen's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. Webb doesn't know who I am. To him, I'm just another investigator. But if he's watching that location, waiting to see our response, I can get close enough to identify him without triggering a confrontation. Hartwell and Martinez exchanged looks. The FBI agent clearly didn't like it, but Chen could see her running the tactical calculus. You wear a wire, you follow my instructions exactly, and we have Overwatch teams covering every angle, Martinez finally said. At the first sign of threat, we extract you. Clear. Clear. 30 minutes later, Chen walked into the gas station wearing civilian clothes and a concealed microphone. FBI teams were positioned in surrounding buildings, sniper overwatch on nearby rooftops, plainclothes agents in vehicles throughout the area. But to anyone watching, she appeared to be alone. She approached the counter where Webb had used his credit card, speaking casually to the clerk about purchasing coffee. Through the window, she scanned the area with peripheral vision, a skill honed through months of maintaining situational awareness while appearing normal. Then she saw him. Webb sat in a parked car across the street, watching the gas station. Their eyes met for just a fraction of a second, and Chen saw recognition flash across his face, not of her specifically, but recognition that she was part of the operation hunting him. He started his engine. Subject is mobile gray Honda Civic, heading north on Riley Road, Chen said quietly into her microphone, maintaining her casual posture at the counter. He knows he was spotted, but he's not running. Speed is deliberate, controlled. All units, subject is northbound, Martinez's voice came through her earpiece. Maintain surveillance, do not engage unless he approaches Fort Bragg. Chen paid for her coffee and walked outside, tracking Webb's vehicle. He wasn't fleeing. He was leading them somewhere. Every tactical instinct told her this was heading toward a confrontation. Webb's car turned toward Fort Bragg. The pursuit lasted 8 minutes, ending at a wooded area adjacent to the base perimeter, a section scheduled for construction and currently unmonitored. Webb stopped his car, stepped out with his hands visible, and stood waiting. FBI tactical teams surrounded the position within 90 seconds, weapons trained on him from multiple angles. But Webb wasn't armed. He simply stood there, waiting. Special Agent Martinez approached with Chen behind her, both wearing tactical vests. "Marcus Webb, you're under arrest. Get on the ground now." Webb smiled, a cold, humorless expression. "You're too late, Agent Martinez. The device is already in place. Been there for 3 months waiting for the right moment. Remote detonation, cellular trigger. All I have to do is make one phone call." Chen's blood ran cold. A prepositioned device. That's why Webb had seemed unconcerned about his cell being compromised. He'd never needed them for the actual attack. "Where is it?" Martinez demanded. "That's the negotiation. I'll tell you where the bomb is, but I want safe passage. Out of the country, new identity, money in an offshore account." "You know we can't agree to that." "Then a lot of people die tomorrow." Webb's expression didn't change. "Your choice, Agent. You have 18 hours to decide." Hartwell, monitoring from the operations center, made a decision. He activated his radio. "Chen, ask him about Building 7. Chen stepped forward. "The structural collapse in Building 7, that wasn't an accident, was it? You sabotaged that support beam months ago, didn't you?" Webb's smile faltered slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You knew that building intimately from your training. You knew which structural points were critical. But what you didn't know was that the collapse would happen during a routine exercise instead of during the ceremony you were targeting. Bad luck, that." Chen was buying time, but she was also probing. Something about Webb's reaction told her the Building 7 collapse hadn't been part of his plan. "Building 7 was reconnaissance," Webb said carefully. "Testing structural vulnerabilities, security response times. I needed to know how fast emergency services would react to a crisis." He was lying. Chen could hear it in the subtle shift of his tone, and suddenly she understood. "There is no bomb," she said quietly. "Building 7 was your plan, wasn't it? You were going to cause a collapse during the ceremony, create mass casualties through what would look like a structural failure. But when it collapsed early during a routine training exercise, you lost your primary attack method. That's why you needed the cell, why you were scrambling to put together a backup plan." Webb's expression hardened. "You're wrong." "No, she's not," Martinez said, understanding dawning. "Your bluff just fell apart, Webb. You have nothing." The FBI teams moved in, taking Webb into custody. He didn't resist, but his eyes found Chen as they cuffed him. "Who are you?" he asked. "You're not FBI. You're not regular Army intelligence." Chen met his gaze with cold certainty. "I'm someone who's dealt with people far more dangerous than you, and you made a critical mistake. You underestimated the people protecting this base." As they led Webb away, Chen felt the adrenaline finally beginning to fade. Her hands started to shake slightly, the physical aftermath of sustained operational stress finally catching up. Hartwell approached, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You broke him. That psychological pressure, reading his tells, that was masterful." "It was necessary, sir." Chen's voice was quiet, the exhaustion finally showing through. "It was extraordinary." Hartwell paused. "The offer I made you 3 days ago about becoming an instructor, do you have an answer?" Chen looked back toward Fort Bragg, toward the base full of soldiers she just helped protect. She thought about the recruits in her training class, young and eager, and about what she could teach them. Not just tactics, but survival, awareness, the skills that had kept her alive in impossible situations. "Yes, sir, I accept." Good, because I also received 3 calls this morning from various agencies wanting you back in the field, including one from a very senior person at JSOC who made it clear that your unique skill set is highly valued. Chen's jaw tightened. Sir, I told them all the same thing, Hartwell interrupted, that you've already given more than most soldiers ever will, and that you've earned the right to serve on your own terms. Your next assignment is here, as an instructor in advanced tactical intelligence. That's official as of 900 this morning. He handed her a folder. Your promotion to Sergeant First Class came through as well. Turns out saving a base from a terrorist attack carries some weight at the Pentagon. Chen took the folder, genuinely surprised. For 18 months she'd lived in shadows, her achievements classified and unacknowledged. Now, standing in the North Carolina sunlight, she was being recognized for who she truly was. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. You're going to have a classroom full of cocky recruits who think they know everything about tactical operations. Teaching them humility while keeping them alive, that's going to be harder than anything you faced overseas. A genuine smile crossed Chen's face, the first real smile Hartwell had seen from her since she arrived. I think I can handle it, sir. As they walked back toward the operations center, Chen felt something shift inside her. The weight of her medals, which had felt like anchors dragging her down, now felt different, not burdens but reminders of strength, resilience, survival. She'd spent months trying to hide who she was, trying to become invisible, trying to erase the parts of herself forged in fire and darkness. But maybe that had been the wrong approach all along. Maybe the answer wasn't to hide those experiences, but to honor them by passing on what she'd learned to the next generation. 3 weeks later, Sergeant First Class Maya Chen stood before her first class of students in the Advanced Tactical Intelligence program. 30 recruits sat in tiered seating, watching her with the mix of curiosity and skepticism young soldiers always showed new instructors. Chen stood at the front of the classroom, her silver star and purple hearts clearly visible on her dress uniform. No more hiding, no more downplaying. This was who she was. Good morning. I'm Sergeant First Class Chen, and I'll be your instructor for the next 12 weeks. Some of you have probably heard rumors about my background. She saw knowing glances exchanged among the students. Word had spread about the recruit who helped stop the attack on Fort Bragg. Here's what you need to know. I've operated in environments where one mistake meant death. I've made some of those mistakes and survived to learn from them. My job is to make sure you learn those lessons without having to pay the price I paid. A hand went up, a young specialist in the front row. Sergeant Chen, is it true you were embedded with terrorist organizations? Chen paused, considering her answer. The truth was still classified, but she could offer something. What I can tell you is that I've worked in denied areas where intelligence gathering required methods beyond traditional collection. I've had to make decisions in situations where there were no good options, only less bad ones. And I've learned that the difference between success and failure often comes down to understanding human behavior, recognizing patterns, and trusting your instincts while verifying everything. She moved to the podium, pulling up her first presentation slide. This course will teach you the technical aspects of tactical intelligence, collection methods, analysis frameworks, operational security. But more importantly, I'm going to teach you how to think like someone who's had to stay alive in hostile territory. How to read people, identify threats, and make rapid decisions under pressure. And she added, her voice carrying the weight of hard experience, I'm going to teach you that the goal isn't to be a hero. The goal is to complete the mission and bring everyone home. Because the real victory isn't in the dramatic rescue or the perfect operation. It's in the quiet competence that prevents crises from happening in the first place. The students were silent, absorbing her words. Chen saw recognition in some eyes. These were soldiers who'd already deployed, who understood that combat wasn't glory, it was survival and professionalism. We start with situational awareness, Chen continued. Not the kind they teach in basic training, but the kind that keeps you alive when you're alone in hostile territory with no backup. Close your eyes. The students obeyed, some with visible skepticism. Now, without opening your eyes, tell me, how many exits are in this room? Silence. How many people are sitting in the row behind you? What color shirt was the person who entered last? Where are the fire extinguishers? A few students shifted uncomfortably, realizing they couldn't answer. Open your eyes. This is lesson 1. Most people move through the world blind to their environment. You cannot afford that luxury. Every room you enter, every street you walk, every conversation you have, you need to be cataloging information, identifying threats, planning contingencies. She gestured to the classroom around them. 3 exits: main door, emergency door left side, window that opens fully enough for egress. 28 students in total. Last person to enter wore a green t-shirt under their uniform blouse. Fire extinguishers are positioned at each exit. Last inspection date visible on the tags was 3 weeks ago, meaning they're due for service. The students stared at her with new respect. This awareness saved my life more times than I can count. It will save yours too. Chen pulled up a case study on the screen. Let's begin. As the class progressed, Chen found herself settling into the role with surprising comfort. Teaching wasn't the same as operating, but it satisfied something deep. The need to ensure that her experiences, her sacrifices, her survival meant something beyond classified reports that would gather dust in secure facilities. After class, Colonel Hartwell stopped by her office, a small space she'd been assigned in the training center building. She was reviewing lesson plans for the following week when he knocked on the open door. "How did it go?" he asked. "Better than expected, sir. They're attentive, motivated. A few of them have combat experience that will make them strong contributors to discussions." Hartwell nodded, then held out a folder. "This came for you this morning, secure courier." Chen took it cautiously. Inside was a simple letter on official letterhead from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. "Sergeant First Class Chen, on behalf of the intelligence community, we thank you for your extraordinary service in operations that cannot be publicly acknowledged. Your contributions directly resulted in the prevention of multiple attacks and the saving of American lives. While your work must remain classified, please know that it is recognized and valued at the highest levels. Your decision to transition to training duties is understood and supported. Should you ever wish to return to operational status, the door remains open. With highest respect." The signature was redacted, but the sentiment was clear. Chen set the letter aside. "They still want me back." "They always will. People with your skills and experience are rare." Hartwell sat across from her. "But that's not what you want anymore, is it?" "No, sir. I gave them 18 months of my life and it cost me more than I realized at the time. I can't go back to that." Chen looked at the lesson plans on her desk. "But this, teaching soldiers how to survive, how to think, how to operate, this feels right. Like I'm finally using what I learned in a way that doesn't require me to lose pieces of myself." "Good, because you're already making an impact. I had 3 students ask me after class how they could get assigned to your advanced course next cycle. Word is spreading that you're the real deal." Chen smiled slightly. "They have no idea what the real deal actually cost." "No, they don't, and they don't need to know the specifics, they just need to learn from it." Hartwell stood to leave, then paused. "Chen, you came here looking for a way to be normal again. Did you find it?" She considered the question carefully. "I don't think I'll ever be normal, sir. Not in the way I was before. But I'm learning to be okay with that. The experiences that changed me, they don't have to define me, but I can't pretend they didn't happen. This position lets me acknowledge them without being consumed by them." "That's probably the healthiest perspective you could have." Hartwell moved toward the door, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. You're exactly the kind of instructor this program needs." After he left, Chen returned to her lesson plans, but her eyes drifted to the medals mounted on her office wall. The Silver Star, the Purple Hearts, the Defense Superior Service Medal, each representing moments of fear, pain, decision, and survival that she'd never be able to fully explain. But she didn't need to explain them anymore. She just needed to honor them by making sure the next generation of soldiers was better prepared than she'd been, more aware, more capable, more likely to survive their own dark moments. Chen looked out her office window at the training grounds below, where recruits ran drills under the Georgia sun. Somewhere among them were the future operators who would face impossible situations in dangerous places. Her job was to give them every advantage she could, to share the lessons learned in blood and sacrifice, to ensure that her suffering had meaning beyond classified files and secret medals. She had arrived at Fort Bragg as just another recruit, hoping to disappear into anonymity and forget who she'd become. Instead, she'd found something better, a way to transform her pain into purpose, her experience into education, her isolation into impact. The war she'd fought in the shadows was over, but the battle to prepare others for their own wars had just begun. And this time, she wouldn't be fighting alone in the dark. This time, she would stand in the light, not hiding what she'd done, but using it to illuminate the path for those who would follow. Sergeant First Class Maya Chen, holder of the Silver Star, survivor of classified operations in denied territory, had finally found her way home. Not to the person she'd been before, but to the person she'd become, scarred, stronger, and finally at peace with the warrior she'd had to be and the mentor she chose to become. The story that began with medals noticed in a morning formation ended with those same medals serving their truest purpose, not as decorations to be hidden or explained, but as symbols of experience earned and wisdom to be shared. She had arrived as just a new recruit. She would leave as something far more valuable, a teacher who'd paid the price of knowledge in the hardest currency imaginable, and who would ensure that price meant something for generations to come.